Goodness. Luminaries, I am so freaking excited. If you're watching on video, you can see like my glow. Today, we are talking with the one and only Alice Sparkly Cat, also known as, maybe call you Ace.
Yeah. Hi, Leslie. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for agreeing to share your story, Ace. If you don't already know Ace, they have an amazing Instagram and Twitter and all about astrology. And they are celebrating their year anniversary, which is a year,
Yeah,
right?
that's true, actually. Yeah.
Your year anniversary of this seminal book, Postcolonial Astrology. It's kind of just blown my mind in so many ways.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'm so psyched about, talking to you about your program starting tomorrow too.
Yes. And so some people call me impulsive, and this just works. I have these like little last minute ideas and I scramble to get them to work. And just by the serendipity, our stars align, and this could work at like just kind of at my impulse curiosity. Tomorrow on solstice, we're opening up my program called Star Powered Summer. And the Star Powered Summer is really this radical decolonized act of claiming joy, claiming rest, and saying like, hey, summer is the time that we're going to stop overworking and we're going to do like the deep yet fun, important work. And for me, with my Gemini rising is like curiosity. I love reading. I love books. And to be honest, Ace, this book, I've had it for over a year. When it first came out, it's been sitting on my shelf and I was afraid to pick it up, to be honest. And the reason why I was afraid was because I knew it was going to rock my world and really like turn up the heat on kind of like the social impact and the change that I know my perspective of astrology is here to do. And now that I'm reading it, I'm just like, oh my goodness. So in Star Powered Summer, we're going to be exploring your book over 3 weeks, looking at each of your sections, capital, power, and labor, and how we practice these things in our businesses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a deep dive.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. I'm just like so interested in how you're going to be building with people, like pushing against things. Yeah. That sounds so cool.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you said in your book that just really struck me, right, about like tying connecting the dots between astrology and supremacy, white supremacy and racism, that these are both kind of constructs, and that there's no like governing power to say like, how are we practicing astrology? How are we practicing supremacy in our lives? And that from this practice of astrology, it's so subjective to the person that is reading the charts, that there's all these wide perspectives. And that really brought me actual joy, because I realized that my perspective of astrology is not traditional. Like I've always kind of bucked up against kind of more traditional Hellenistic views, especially when it comes to like detriments or exaltations and things like that. Yeah. Everything in my chart is like in detriment. I don't have like one single planet that is like, quote unquote good. Mm-hmm. And so the people that come to me that I surround myself with, and I'm also post Uranus opposition, tend to be more established in their businesses and for so long have either replicated or accommodated systems of supremacy simply to just get by. And so my people take a lot of unlearning, where I think that your people in this younger generation, it's so hopeful that they get to just live in their true identity and not have to like try on something that is just doesn't fit.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I have 3 planets in detriment too. And yeah, I get the struggle. Of being an astrologer and trying to, like just play with the language a little bit.
Yeah, make your own
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. I feel like people maybe my age, I think we're also kind of coerced into accommodating. And yeah, I mean, just surviving too. I feel like it's like kind of a cross-generational conversation that could be happening.
For sure, especially
Mhm.
for those of us that are othered
Mhm.
and in just kind of that narrow definition of like being like less than because we are othered depending on our gender identification or our age or our skin color, just all these
Mhm.
ridiculous things.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, Ace, just kind of a year after your book has been released into the world, what have you seen like this kind of the life of your book evolved? How have you seen things change or not?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a funky question because I feel like I was writing the book before this global pandemic. And then, like, just so much changed during the pandemic. Yeah. I feel like we were really called on to do more mutual aid and organizing. And I feel like people are just like kind of running just, I mean, into these walls too with all the issues around mutual aid and organizing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, because our world is set up to not encourage the growth, the building of these things. Like we do have a lot of issues when we try to build them. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just like existing conversations that are getting louder around that.
Mhm.
And then I also feel like we can see some of the issues more plainly now.
Well, I think some of the also, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you've noticed this, is that there's a lot of confusion in terms of what do we call things. Like people don't exactly know what colonialism is. People don't know exactly like what mutual aid is.
Mhm.
That sometimes when I talk about in my communities, this idea of like, what is post capitalism? There are
Mhm.
people that really freak out. They can't see a future past capitalism. And they are like, well, I don't want socialism to run my life where the government is controlling everything and the one percenters are controlling. And I'm like, hello, the one percenters are controlling things right now. So, do you notice that
Mhm.
there's kind of a need for some education in terms of like your vision of mutual aid and your vision of like what colonialism is?
I mean, I feel like colonialism, yeah, I haven't really seen like a formal definition of the word or anything, or like a redefinition of the word. It's being reclaimed. With mutual aid, it is a little bit hard to tell. Sometimes it's like organizing to raise funds for an issue or, um, food justice, things like that. So it can be in like just so many forms. I think the problem that you're talking about, like just not being able to imagine a future without capitalism. Mark Fisher writes about that. So it's kind of it's kind of a big issue because
Yeah.
part of what capitalism does is it really tries to imagine our future for us too.
Mm, that's so
Mhm.
powerful. I want to come back to some of those definitions because
Mhm.
um, the like colonialism, but I'm super curious about hearing your story about that process of writing the book because postcolonial astrology is like, it is packed with historical references and it is so eloquently and beautifully written, like thinking about your Venus Mercury conjunction, out of sign conjunction, and just how you bring the activism yet the poetry to it all. It's so gorgeous. So could you share a little bit about that process and of course divine timing that it was released when it was?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been interested in ideas like for years. Yeah. Just talking with people, raising questions, people asking me questions like, hey, how does this work in the Southern Hemisphere, for example? So,
Mm.
yeah, just kind of like that. And then the research. I mean, a friend gave me like a JSTOR login. So I just like went in, searched different things. I mean, I still use it. I'm not going to say what the login is because I don't want them to block me from it. I was keeping notes on different things. I would handwrite the notes and then type it up too, just because it would help me remember. And it's not the best way to keep information intact. So we did find 2 errors. So there's like an updated version. And then we fixed the 2 errors. And then that's kind of how the research goes for me, is just read a bunch of random things that are loosely related or not, and then look for different things. Like, for example, like the thing around the festivals, like, and that was, you can search things around like medieval times around those festivals, but you can also, I was looking at astrological texts around the, like the Saturn festivals and things like that too. Yeah.
So when you are putting, like, how long did it take you from like research to starting to just get to the editing part? How long were you researching and writing?
Like about a year, a little bit over.
Okay. So not too bad. That was pretty quick then.
Right. Yeah.
Do you have a background in research?
No, not at all.
So I absolutely love that, right? Because, like, for example, in colonialism or capitalism, there's like these kinds of institutionalized constructs, right? That if you don't have a PhD behind your name, if you didn't go through all of those hoops, then you ace are not allowed to do research, right? Like, who are you to do research? I feel that a lot of people like buck up against, well, I don't have this kind of experience, or I don't have those kinds of accolades or accomplishments, so I can't do this. And for people like you and people like me are like, hey, our life is an experience. And yes, of course, we get to put this work out there. And so I love hearing that intersection.
Oh, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I mean, I don't have an academic background at all, and I mean, I have very little education. The JSTOR login I got was for like a high school program. Yeah, but the thing I found out is that if you find a paper that you really want to read, you can like Google the name of the person who did the research, find an email them directly. And if you ask for their research, a lot of academics are very happy to share. They actually, I heard they don't really get royalties from the academic journals selling their work. So they're just happy that someone's using their research. They'll just send you the paper.
Just for the information to get out there. Like, that's just so beautiful. I wanted to kind of go back to this idea of like mutual aid and work, and just this experience of colonialism. How do you define colonialism in your book? I know that you have this about, we're not in a post-colonial world yet. How do you define colonialism in society and in work?
I mean, it's an ongoing process that has many forms, like policing, settlerism, the market too. And then so, it has many forms. It's just an ongoing process of extraction. And I think when I refer to colonialism, I think most of the time it's referring to like a specific process that started with the, like with the conquering of the Americas by Europeans. And I think, because there's like earlier forms of colonialism that we more call like empire building that, are much older, like ancient Rome, ancient China kind of thing. And then there's other processes too, like what's happening in Africa with China is a form of colonialism too. And then so I think colonialism often refers to these more modern processes of extraction.
So like in the last like 1,000 years or so.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
growing up in Hawaii and being still really rooted there, even though I live in San Francisco now, like colonialism was just like this everyday thing. And 2020 really opened our eyes as a collective, just in terms of like socioeconomic injustice. And for me, I learned about colonial mentality. Have you ever heard of colonial mentality?
No, tell me about that. Yeah.
Yes. So colonial mentality, it's defined as the perception of ethnic and cultural inferiority and a form of internalized racial oppression. And so what this means, I had no idea there was a word for this. Like, I'm half Filipino and half Jewish, and I never told people that I was Filipino or Jewish until just like a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was ashamed of being both, like in terms of like feeling persecuted or othered even more than I am as like a brown older woman. It's just like so much where my grandmother never taught us the language for fear that we would have an accent. So I was like really separated and cut off from my roots. Personally, for me, like when I think about colonialism, to add on to this kind of extractive process, colonialism works because we separate, right? Just like capitalism, separation to create scarcity, separation to conquer and divide, separating people from their culture, from their land. And to decolonize, now, another kind of broad perspective of things is to bring things back together.
Yeah.
Right, to form relationships. And so when I hear you speaking about mutual aid, this idea of mutual aid is that how do we cultivate a sharing economy when there's a surplus of food in one part of the world? How do we share it? Or just in one part of the community? Like, mutual aid doesn't have to be global, it starts locally. And so the beauty of like decolonizing our work, decolonizing our society, of just like purely measuring abundance and sharing versus measuring debt and hoarding.
Yeah.
Would you say that kind of sparked something in you?
Yeah, that definitely hit me. Wow. Like, what you're saying about how it's about like separation, it's making me think about, one of the things that happened after a traumatic event is fragmentation too. Like, this is deeply traumatic. And yeah, it's about like just like kind of bringing people together, but also bringing different parts of yourself together too.
So it's time to defrag.
Or yeah, what's the thing they tell us? Like, being with all your parts.
Yes. So I think being with all your parts, I love the teaching of like Chiron, that even if you have like this primal wound, you're still complete, you're still whole, you're still worthy. So when you think of like, forget about like everything that we have to dismantle, when you think about like your utopian vision, like if we are creating this post-capitalistic future and we get to decide through our ideas and being, I like to call us science fiction writers, right? Like whatever we can vision and whatever we can write, we can create. What would you create? What would be your utopian vision?
Oh man, wow. Yeah. I feel like I've never thought about that before. I'm someone who I feel like I'm always fumbling around. Like I go
playing and experimenting.
Yeah, I meet someone and then they're like, telling me, oh, there's the strategy for bringing people together. And then we're going to do this and it's going to feed people here. And then I'm like, oh, okay, like, cool. How can I help out? I meet someone else and it's like, oh, hey, I have this whole other strategy. We're going to activate this space. And it just looks so different. And then, yeah, talking with different people who are maybe even organizing for local leadership too, with city councils. So it's like, yeah, it's hard. I don't really have like a unified vision. And then I'm always just I literally feel like I'm fumbling like a football or something. Doing different things.
It's everything is an experiment, right? Especially
Mhm.
like you just have your Saturn return, well, not
Mhm.
just, but like within the year. So you're still like kind of like regrouping
Yeah.
after all of that, and thinking about all the power that is still yet to come with like midlife awakenings. Like you're gathering all your tools. Like I tell people, like if in a video game, right, you're collecting your inventories so that you can fight the big boss monster at the end. So you're still collecting tools. You're not fumbling.
Okay, that makes me feel better. I like the video game reference.
Yes, both my husband and my son are like just video game people, and like for me with my colonial mentality and just this need to overwork and overproduce, like I always thought that video games were such a waste of time
Mm,
because I was like brainwashed into saying like, oh, like that's wasteful because I
yeah.
had to produce, right? And
Yeah.
now really seeing the value of that playtime and just their learnings from that.
Yeah. You have Saturn in the first house, right?
I do. Gemini
Yeah.
rising with Saturn
Mm-hmm.
and Gemini in the first house.
Dang, because yeah, I know mine's in the 12th house, like quadrant houses. I see it as first house Saturn too. I'm like,
Oh,
same
okay.
way, yeah. And like, oh wow, let's squeeze the hours.
Let's overdo and overwork and work hard.
Yeah,
And
work hard. What's the bottom line?
uh,
Mhm.
do you do whole sign houses when you're looking at charts?
I use whole sign houses for natal, yeah.
For name. What other
Mhm.
forms of astrology do you practice? Do you like horary, electional?
I don't do that kind of thing with other people. Like I usually just hold space for natal because there's other things I bring into it, like somatics, things like that. So I'm like, that's what I'm confident in doing for other people. And
Yeah.
then yeah, for myself, I look at other things too. I look at events, locations and with the angles, things like that. But yeah, and I just do natal.
Cool. I like natal too. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think part of, for me, um having that colonial mentality and how you said like people love to use astrology to identify, to self-identify and to learn more about themselves. And I feel like that I really fell into astrology and creating my own language around that
Mm-hmm.
to break free and dismantle all of these things that say like, oh, if you're a Cancer rising you can't be a leader because you're too sensitive. And I'm like, no, Cancer rising, get there, get out there and like protect and hug people and like be that emotional labor and get paid for that valuable labor in the
Mm-hmm.
marketplace. So I just love that.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like just kind of like knowing yourself that like there's something about that that just kind of pushes past everything or pushes against
Yes.
everything.
Well, and I think that's why your book is so important, right? Because a lot of people who learn astrology, they're going to be learning it from the internet and they're going to be learning it from their friends. And there are so many sources that just like amp up the fear, like you are
Mm,
fated, you're destined to be not successful if you have anything in detriment or things like that. If you're an Aquarius rising or I have an Aquarius sun. Oh, I'm looking at your chart in Placidus, but
mhm.
even your 25 degrees of Aquarius rising is right on my natal sun and Jupiter.
Oh wow. Oh, you just had a Jupiter return.
I did. My Jupiter return was like so effed, let me just say.
Mhm.
Yes, I had a big visioning, like expansion, but at the same time, Saturn has been
Mhm.
sitting right now. It's
Yeah.
sitting on your rising, it's sitting on my sun and so I feel like all my Jupiter like just got squashed.
Oh,
Thank you, Saturn, for crystallizing and focusing me. I appreciate you.
that's so funny. Yeah, and I guess yeah, next Jupiter return you'll get a Saturn return too. So kind of same deal, maybe.
I guess that's why I just can't win.
But actually, I mean, I had such a bad time in all my Jupiter returns. And then I know in Chinese astrology, it's your worst year into Jupiter return.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's your Chinese astrology?
Mhm.
Are you
Uh,
a What?
It's the day pillar is fire dragon,
Oh, fire.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and the year pillar is water monkey.
I don't know the differences. I only know I don't I'm a wood tiger and I'm not I really excited about the wood tiger, although I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. It's I think wait, isn't it water tiger year this year? So it's
Might be, but yeah, my natal is wood tiger.
nice. Yeah.
So,
I'm fire and then I'm born at night. So then it's weak fire already and then water years. Got
that
a really
Cancer
weak
moon.
yeah. I have a really weak chart in Chinese.
See, and then what good does that do, right? If we tell people when they're born, it's like, oh, Ace, you have a weak chart. Like,
well, it's not a bad thing, actually.
It's not a bad thing.
If you have a strong chart, exuberant chart, it's not always good too. Then you're just looking for ways to like use the energy to drain it. And if you have a weak chart, you're trying to use look for the opposite, like support. So it says different things, but yeah.
Got it. See, and I'm like going all the way, like, don't tell me I'm weak.
I'm like, I kind of like it. I'm like, oh yeah, oh, I got a weak chart.
So how do you, with your work and with this book, how do you kind of fashion your business, your change-making work?
Well, it's always a struggle. And then so I actually did a workshop recently about just how to start a magical business, like astrology and tarot, other things. And then I think the issue is what we started with first is surplus value. And for those who don't know, that's a Marxist term around the value that's generated by the workers that don't get paid out to the workers and are also not used to purchase any machinery or materials, raw materials, things like that. So that's value that is living inside of a product. It has to be realized through the marketplace. And then because the workers in the economy don't have the capital to realize that value, then the market has to constantly expand. And that's what leads to imperialism. And so, that's what we started with. And as practitioners, we're not creating any surplus value because we are our own workers. That's the first thing we start with. We're not trying to create surplus value. It's sometimes called profit, but we're not trying to create any surplus value. We're trying to eat from our own hand. That creates a lot of vulnerabilities because because we're essentially trying to create these jobs without an infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So it goes into the pricing, things like that. How do we make sure that we can get healthcare? We can give ourselves sick days. How do we make sure that we're not just working, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day too? So it goes into a lot of this stuff. And it's actually really hard. I think it's really hard to build a practice that doesn't have the goal of generating surplus value because you have to do all the labor. You have to be accountable to all the labor. You have to be accountable to all your needs, your community needs. You're not just extracting this labor. It's really hard.
Now, how do you, when you're helping other people build their businesses, are people being kind of like solopreneurs and working for themselves? Or are they working in collectives where they're helping each other out? Or are they also like building out teams to kind of grow their influence?
Well, that's the thing is, a lot of people, they are like, I am a tarot reader. I'm trying to start a practice. So it's kind of one person. Sometimes it's, more than one, two or something like that. And then the thing that supports individual practitioner the most is collaboration. Yeah. So I think, that's what we really people got out of doing the workshop too. It's just getting to know people. What do you do? Wow, how do we support each other? Because as one person, you can't really, you can't, like operations, hey, I'm holding space for people's deep trauma, also doing marketing, things like that. So when
Yeah.
you collaborate, you kind of, you get to split it a little bit, and
Yeah.
then makes every component of the collaboration stronger.
I love that so much because I think, when at least in the online world, in like my bubbles and things like that, there's a lot of people who are, like become a $1 million coach, like make $10,000 a month, otherwise you're like not worthy. But what I see in like those kinds of like $1 million coaching is that it's really set up like an MLM,
Oh,
right?
wow. Yeah. How so?
So they're using bro marketing and scare tactics, so more extraction. They're creating false scarcity
Mm,
and like using fear mongering tactics like, okay, you have to decide today and spend like $5,000 on this coaching package because tomorrow it's going to be $8,000. And
mm,
these are coming from like
yeah.
women of color
Yeah.
who are supposedly talking about these kinds of like um, taking supremacy out of businesses, but they're using the exact same practices that supremacy was built on. It boggles my mind. And so I love this idea of how do we collaborate, because one of the things and just kind of where I've been reading and where I've been following my heart in terms of like post colonialism is returning to a lot of indigenous structures where there is very like circular structures. There's not like one like all be like sun ra leader, right? There's like more like we're all in a circle. We all have our special gifts and we're all supposed to contribute. And yes, we can build collaborations, we can build teams. And how do we profit share? So I know even though in my business, it's still based on like capitalistic business models, but I have like a 2% give back, like of all of my revenue, like 2% goes to whatever organizations. Like right now, I'm all about freedom of choice and protecting reproductive rights. And then thinking about with like my team, like I have Crystal and I have Jeff who depend on me. And so there's like profit sharing there. And our profit margins, like we're talking like 5% profit margins. And so giving, like putting some into savings just to take care of ourselves and then giving it back. So there isn't this surplus value, because if I think about like the Jeff Bezos's,
Mhm.
like that kind of hoarding of value is unethical.
Yeah, it's not ethical. It leads to imperialism.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. And then I think, when you're like, oh, I'm gonna put my money here in the reproductive justice, it's also, yeah, it's community and self-support too. I
Yeah.
mean, so I feel like to map a business, you have to map your needs in all types of layers. Like, what are my social needs? What are my political needs too? And how
Sure.
does my business go into that, supporting everything that I'm going to need as a person, my community needs as a group too.
I love that so much because I think that I use astrology. Like before, I was using astrology with my clients and like building out values to attract your soul customers, like your own like social impact. Like what do you want to like impact change in the world? I feel like people were just guessing, but then when we
Mhm.
can use astrology, it actually kind of like on a natal perspective, it gives us so much insight as to the strengths that we're supposed to amplify
Mhm.
and the values that we're supposed to bring out. So I love that we're aligned on that. And
Yeah, and it probably creates like more of a like invitation for people to get really creative with it too.
yeah, and it's still new though. People are still like, wait, what are you doing with astrology? I'm like, I want to blow people's minds just like you've blown my mind.
Oh,
This
you're blowing
book.
my mind.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things that we were talking or having a chat earlier about is like precarity. I hear that like for like new business owners and trying to put together their new businesses. How are you helping, or what do you think that we need more support for people who are starting with gaining more predictability in their own sense of job security?
Yeah, that's a huge issue, not just for, I mean, starting business, but also for mutual aid. I feel like one of the biggest frustrations I've had in the last few years is just like sometimes it feels like we're trying to circulate like nothing. Like we just don't have enough resources to like go around. And yeah, that's extremely frustrating. I think if you're starting practice and then you're trying to, and you're trying to, find your clients, um, I mean, I think just talking to people the same way that you would make friends, honestly, is huge. I actually don't really believe in marketing because marketing, like at first, is a liability. And then so I think people really need to focus on sales. Yeah.
Well, who do you, when you think about when people are focusing on sales, how are they like, they still have to build those relationships to people, right? So that they can have some like a community to support and to serve.
Yeah, like getting out there, going to a marketplace and just talking with people, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like physical relationships can be so important.
I'm
Especially
craving that right now.
yeah. Yeah, especially when you're starting off and you're kind of like figuring out who you are too, because that's like what's really shaping you.
Yes. Well, one of the things, and like if we come back to our natal charts and like at every kind of evolution, because our natal charts aren't just 2D, they're 3D, there's 4D, because our natal charts will express at like wherever we are. One of the things that, like when I'm looking at your chart, you do such a brilliant job of creating those relationships to those creatives, right? The way that I practice astrology is I look at that seventh house cusp. And so even in whole sign or Placidus, you have that Leo on that descendant. And like your soul customers crave that creative brilliance. They crave that, like, who am I? What is my sovereignty? And how am I here to shine that brilliance? And you've done such a spectacular job at building that community. I've been following you on Instagram for a while, but I got that course around the boundaries, and just like your fun approach to that from creative writing, it's like brilliant. And so I just want to reflect back at just what a glorious job that you've done, pulling in your natal energies.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had such a great time at the mapping boundaries class because I took a class on boundaries and then it was with someone who works with babies. So yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes when we talk about boundaries, it feels like, oh, it's one more thing I have to communicate, like one more task kind of thing. And then it's like, oh no, babies have boundaries too. And then that kind of switches it. And then yeah, I feel like people with autism are telling me, this really works for me in a way that maybe other things don't work. And I'm autistic too. So it's like, the kind of like world building with the boundaries, like feeling it physically. Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah.
I love that. When you think about like that social impact, right? Even though like in astrological years, you're still very young, and then you're like making all this like great impact. What is that impact you hope to leave on the world? And I do suspect it has something to do with creating boundaries.
I don't know. Yeah. Like I feel like I feel like in the last couple of years at least, I'm not interested in like living better or like more intelligently or anything like that. I'm just interested in surviving. Like that's kind of like people really underestimate just survival. Like, yeah, so many things could help you survive. Anger helps you survive. Fear helps you survive. Like, we're like, why are we trying to like exercise these feelings? Like, they're things that feel alive sometimes. So all I'm interested in right now is survival. And that's not easy because part of colonialism is part of these huge eugenics programs are designed to wipe us out. They're designed to wipe queer people out. They're designed to wipe people of color out. And so, like, again, I'm not interested in having any values that are like saying this is good or bad right now. Like, I'm just interested in helping people, supporting people in their survival somehow.
Survival. I love this idea of boundaries and survival. And I think of the archetype that comes to me as Saturn, right? About creating those boundaries. But then when we think about decolonizing Saturn, for me, at least, even before I read this book, is like Saturn, we've really experienced the shadow of Saturn by institutions over organized hierarchies and really like gatekeeping to like who is allowed to have authority or not. But then when we kind of break down and dismantle those oppressive systems of Saturn, what we see now is like this trellis. Like we need this trellis. We need this like skeletal system to hold up our bodies, to separate our physical beings from the next physical beings. And thinking about like jasmine or any kind of like beautiful vining plants, they need the trellis to climb up. And so how are we going to build that trellis, those boundaries, that anger, that fear that is part of our natal makeup to now create our own authority? And so that's how I've been recreating Saturn.
Wow. You just gave me a little bit of goosebumps. Like, I love that imagery. Just the trellis. Yeah. First house Saturn. Yeah.
Your first house Saturn. Well, and you know, I'm looking at your natal chart again in Placidus. And in Placidus, you have the Capricorn, you have intersected 11th house. Right. And 11th house, social impact, community building, bringing your soul community together. And then North Node, like right on their like 3 degrees Capricorn, like so close to like the world axes, right? Like, so you are a world axes player in terms of like social change, and this social change around Capricornian themes and how you're going to reinvent structure, reinvent organization, reinvent boundaries for your soul communities to live. Like that's your social impact.
Oh, dang. Thanks for saying that, Leslie. And, you know, the Saturn in 12th house chart ruler, like everyone in my family has that. We're all Aquarius rising.
Oh, no way.
Born each other Saturn. Like my dad, my grandpa. So, it's kind of funny.
Oh my goodness. I mean, obviously you guys have some, if we're going to talk about epigenetics, you guys have some ancestral work to do there.
And we're all like these, I don't know, like probably on the spectrum, quiet people who just keep to themselves.
I hope that this wasn't painful to speak to like a quasi extrovert.
Oh, no. It's so enjoyable. I feel like I'm just like, you know, like drinking your words.
Oh, thank you. Well, what as kind of a last thought, is there anything that you would love to leave here? Another like a food for our thoughts?
Wow, I'm so excited about your program, Star Powered Summit. Summer, sorry.
Okay.
And then, I feel like, like doing it in the summer when, like, I don't know, everyone has all these to-do lists and then you're trying to slow down too. That's so crucial. And then, I feel like really just kind of like building those bones, that scaffolding right now is a huge question mark. And then that can feel really creative too. So I feel excited. I feel really excited after talking with you.
Well, thank you. Oh my gosh, Ace, this has been such a joy. How can people find you and work with you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on my website, www.alicesparkleycat, cat with a K.com. And then, yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, writings about astrology. I sometimes post workshops. Yeah. And then I do have a mailing list too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Everybody has to get on that mailing list. Like, just mind blown every time. Like, Ace has just such an amazing, beautiful way and just amazing, beautiful perspective on astrology. I thoroughly enjoy it.
Thank you. Oh.
Well, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me and our audience and talking about your book.
Same. Thanks for spending your morning with me.
All right, bye for now. Hey everybody, it's Leslie back again. And so I really wanted to invite you, especially if anything in this conversation with Ace Alice Sparkly Cat spoke to you, please join me for Star Powered Summer. Star Powered Summer in itself is a radical act in terms of claiming and making time for your joy, your rest, your curiosity, to do the deep and powerful work, right? It's because of the systems of hard work that we breathe in terms of capitalism and patriarchy and colonialism, all of those isms that keep us trapped in this overworking and overdoing. And so by making space, intentional space for you, this for yourself this summer, doing this kinds of powerful yet fun work is the type of thing that the powers that be do not want us doing. So let's explore, let's spend time having fun. It all starts off with a visionary healing session on solstice with my favorite business bestie, Asha Frost, Indigenous medicine woman. So consider joining us and head on over to thesavvyluminary.com/summer to sign up. And because there's all kinds of things with inflation and just really uncertainty in terms of money, if this is a money thing, please, please, please reach out to me. Reach out to me on Instagram, reach out to me in my Facebook community, wherever. Let me know, because I don't want money to hold you back from doing this powerful work. We will work something out. So if this work calls to you for Star Powered Summer, let me know. You get 3 powerful ceremonies co-hosted by 3 powerful, radical, revolutionary joy, rest, and healing coaches. And then we'll be spending 3 weeks exploring Alice Sparkly Cat's post-colonial astrology and really connecting the dots on how we are still operating in this extractionary kind of models in our businesses. We'll be just kind of connecting the dots and seeing where we can do better. All right, loves, it's Leslie signing off. Please consider joining me for Star Powered Summer. Head on over to thesavvyluminary.com/summer. If you love this podcast, please consider doing me a favor and heading over to Apple iTunes and leaving me a rating and review. Your rating and review helps this humble podcast get seen and found by more listeners like you. Please share the love.